This was the first and only time I ever used Craigslist. It was about 5 years ago. In the springtime, when the snow was all melted and the grass was starting to grow long again, I went to my garage to get the lawnmower. I had an old push mower, and it hadn't been used in months. When I wheeled it out of my garage, it wouldn't start. I couldn't figure out the problem, and after researching online with no luck, I realized I probably needed to buy a new one. The one I had was really old anyways, and it had had some problems in the past. My yard is not all that big, so I only needed another push mower, and I figured they wouldn't be too expensive to buy a used one. I went to Craigslist and searched in my local area for lawnmowers. After browsing for a little while, I found one that seemed to be the best deal. It was $100, and it seemed like a reasonable price to me. After some thought, I decided to reach out and let the seller know that I was interested in buying it. I texted the number that was on the listing and received a response about an hour later. The response said that if I wanted to buy the mower, I could come by and purchase it tomorrow night. I agreed, and I was then provided with an address and a time to pick it up, which was 8 p.m. This was a little later than I would have liked, but I agreed. The next night, I drove my small SUV to the address that I was sent, and I texted the seller letting them know that I was on my way. I got a text back saying, "Sounds good, the mower's in the garage, come right in." It took me almost 20 minutes to get there, and it was a little bit farther than I wanted. When I arrived, it seemed to be a pretty typical residential neighborhood. There were a bunch of houses along both sides of the street. I saw the address of the house that I was going to. The garage door was open, and I parked my car on the side of the street. I texted the seller that I had arrived. I waited in my car until I got a response. It took about a minute, but the seller said, "Come on up." I got out of my car, walked across the street, and then up the driveway. When I got inside the garage, it was not very well lit. There was just a dim light bulb in the middle. I looked around, and there was miscellaneous stuff that you would typically find in a garage, but there was no lawnmower. I took a few more steps in and called out, "Hey, I'm here." I didn't hear anything. I saw the normal step up to the door leading to the house, but then I saw another door. It was in the far back right corner, and this was a door that was open and seemingly leading into another hallway. I saw a piece of a cardboard box was propped up against the door, and written in marker it said, "Lawnmower," and then had an arrow pointing inside the door. I was a little confused by this, and it seemed a little bit sketchy, but I walked over to it. When I got to the doorway, things were pretty dark, and I couldn't see well, but I did see that there was a door to the right and then a staircase going straight down to seemingly a basement. The arrow was pointing down the stairs, so maybe this guy had his lawnmower in the basement for some reason. I started walking down the stairs to the basement area. When I made it to the bottom of the stairs, I could now see that the entire basement appeared to be unfinished, and the lighting wasn't much better in there either. Still, I didn't see a lawnmower. Then I heard noise coming from up the stairs. It was the door from the garage leading to the basement, and it was closing. It wasn't slammed or anything. It was closed relatively quietly, but I still heard it. I looked up the staircase, but didn't see anybody. Whoever had closed the door closed it from the outside. I suddenly had a really bad feeling, and I just wanted to leave. I walked back up the stairs as quickly as I could. As I was making it to the top of the stairs, I heard another door close, and then footsteps. Somebody else was in the house. It sounded like they had gone in the other door leading from the garage. I tried opening the door to the garage, but it was somehow locked from the outside. I couldn't open it. Then I tried the other door leading to inside the house. That one was already open a crack. When I made it inside the rest of the house, I saw that I was in some sort of hallway. It was small and led to a living room type of area that had a sliding glass door that went out to a back patio. I heard footsteps approaching from another room around the corner. Without hesitating, I went to the sliding glass door and opened it. Once outside, I shut it behind me, just in time to see a man coming into view inside the house. I didn't get a good look at him at all, but he was walking in my direction at a rather fast speed. I bolted out of there, sprinting all the way from the backyard to around the house and garage and all the way back to my car. When I made it inside my vehicle, I started the engine and immediately left. I drove all the way back home, and then I blocked the number just because I didn't want anything to do with that guy. I reported my experience on the Craigslist website and then decided to buy a new lawnmower from the store. Since then, I haven't used Craigslist. I'm not sure if I'll use it again sometime. Maybe things have changed. All I know is I will never forget that experience I had, and I hope to never have one like that again. Last year, I broke my leg and was unable to do a lot of things that I typically do. I live alone in a smaller house, and my friends and family were really nice in helping me out when I first got the crutches. Soon after, though, I realized that I would have to do yard work, and I didn't want to ask family or friends to do it. Everybody in my neighborhood takes great pride in their yards. The lawns are all very green and trimmed often. There's generally nice flowers in most as well. I have a typical garden, just some basic flowers by the house, and then most of my front yard is just grass that I cut weekly. I decided to go on Craigslist to find somebody to keep up my yard for a few weeks until I would be able to again. There was only 3 weeks until I would be able to do yard work, and I didn't want to hire a company because I knew that would be really expensive. I found an ad on Craigslist that said, "Male just graduated from high school, looking to earn money doing odd jobs during summer." He even listed yard work in the ad, and I figured this would be a good person to go with. I contacted the kid, whose name was Michael. He responded saying that he was excited to have a job for a few weeks, and I told him he would come over once a week. The job would be cutting the grass and watering the flowers, also cutting down weeds if there were any, and picking up sticks in the yard. Probably would only take an hour or two each week. The next week, Michael arrived at my house, and I went outside to greet him. Right away, though, things seemed strange. Michael did not appear to be in high school at all. He had a full beard for starters, and I know some high schoolers can grow full beards, but he just didn't look 18 or 19, more like 29 or 30. Right away, I said to Michael that I thought he said he had just graduated high school. He looked confused for a moment, and then said that he looks a little older than he actually is. He admitted that he hadn't just graduated, but claimed he forgot to change his ad for a few years. More like 10 years, I thought. Still, he looked capable of doing the work, and he was already here, so I gave him the information that he needed, and he started working. I went inside and went over some work stuff. I was working part-time at home and part-time in the office at the time. Occasionally, I would glance out the window to see what Michael was doing. The first day went pretty well. He did all of the maintenance work in about an hour, and then I paid him, and he left. The next week was a bit different. There was the same amount of work to be done, if not less, but he was there for almost 3 hours. I wasn't quite sure why he took so long, because I wasn't paying him by the hour. But finally, he finished, I paid him, and he left. The next week, which was the last one, he was there for a lengthy amount of time again, and this time, I noticed him poking around some of the windows and areas of my house from the outside. I really didn't know what he was doing. Cleaning the windows was not part of the job. That's seemingly what he was doing, though. I was careful not to let him notice me when I watched him work, but seeing this was a little confusing. At last, he was done, and I paid him for the final time, and he left. I was glad to be done working with Michael. He was a little strange and definitely misrepresented himself. But that same night, at about midnight, I was still awake and on my phone in my bedroom. I'm a bit of a night owl, and I frequently stay up past midnight. I heard the sound of a window opening at the opposite end of my house. Immediately, I knew what was happening. I just knew it had to be Michael. Looking back, I could have been wrong, but I had more than a hunch. I didn't know what he wanted or what he was trying to do, but when I suddenly heard footsteps coming into the house, I knew I had to do something. I stepped out into my hallway, just a couple of steps. Then, I shouted as loud as I could that I knew it was Michael and I had a gun. I didn't have a gun, but I wanted to scare him off. It actually worked, and I heard footsteps moving back until I heard noises around the window again. I left my room and walked into the living room to see an open window. I went to the front of my house and saw what sure enough appeared to be Michael running out of the front yard and onto the street. I made sure that all of my windows and doors were closed, then I went back to bed. The next day, I went to the police with all of my information. It was not difficult at all for them to find Michael, because his ad was still on Craigslist. I'm glad I was awake that night when he tried breaking in, or I'm not sure what would have happened. Last year, I was selling my car. I had a 2015 Toyota Camry, but I recently started leasing a new car, and I didn't need the Camry anymore. I had bought the Camry on Craigslist and paid a good amount of money for it, so I wanted to get all that I could. When I listed it for about the top price that was still within reason. At first, the car didn't garner much attention. The ad was on Craigslist for probably 4 or 5 days before I was contacted. The first person that contacted me sent me a lowball offer, which I declined. The second person who texted me about the car said that they wanted to look at it and were seriously considering buying it. We texted back and forth for a bit. It was a man who told me his name was Rob. Rob told me that he worked really odd hours, and the only time he would be able to look at the car was late at night. He then asked if he could see it at 11 p.m. the next night. This seemed strange to me, but I understood that some people work strange hours and don't have much time. He told me that he was very serious about buying the car, and if he liked it, he would buy it that same night. He offered me slightly less for the car over text. It was a number that I was willing to accept, though. I thought about it for a few minutes, and then I agreed with him. I really wanted to sell the car, and I suggested that we meet at a nearby shopping center or something. Rob recommended a mall parking lot, and I agreed. I knew where it was, and it was maybe 10 minutes from my house. We agreed to meet at the east side of the parking lot, and the next night, before leaving, I called my brother who lives a few minutes away from me. Luckily, he said he would stay up in case I needed a ride back home to my apartment if I sold the car. I drove to the mall shortly after 11. When I arrived, the parking lot was completely empty and very quiet. There were a few lights here and there. It was kind of spooky being there at that time. I parked in a spot on the east side, just like we agreed, and I texted Rob that I was there. Rob texted me back saying that he was running a tad bit late because of work, but would be there soon. I stayed in my car, parked, and looked around the quiet parking lot. As I was looking, I noticed something on the ground. I squinted my eyes and looked closer. It appeared to be a dollar bill of some sort on the ground. I couldn't tell the amount, if it was a 1 or if it was 100, but it definitely looked like a dollar bill. I thought about getting out of my car to go grab it, but I just decided to drive closer to it for some reason. It was maybe 30 feet away, and there was a large garbage dumpster about 20 feet beyond the dollar bill. I put my car into gear and drove closer. When I pulled up near it, I saw that it was a $100 bill. I was just about to stop my car right there, get out, and grab it, but that's when I noticed something else. There was somebody hiding behind the dumpster, crouched down. They moved out of view and farther behind the dumpster right after I saw them. Something about this was too sketchy. I kept driving so that I could get a view of the person behind the dumpster, but they once again moved out of sight behind the other side of it. I parked in a nearby spot. I wanted to leave, but Rob wasn't there yet, so I decided to call him. But then I had a strange thought. I rolled down my window a little as I called Rob. It was completely quiet outside. When I called him, I just barely heard a phone ring, and it was coming from behind the dumpster. As soon as I heard it, I sped out of the parking lot. I got back on the street and drove home. Rob texted me, asking me where I went. I didn't respond to him, though. Instead, I blocked him. I know that was him doing some kind of setup to probably rob me. That $100 bill might have been real or fake, but whoever was hiding behind that dumpster was probably planning to jump me or something. I'm really glad I didn't fall for it.